Tired of Gaulis.
We are tired of Gaulis. We are tired of Gaulis. Yes, that is a appropriate opening line. We are tired of Gaulis. We are tired of Gaulis. No, we're just confused with the varying, whatever, setting up computer issues. Anyway, we are tired of Gaulis, but hopefully last week was a taste of Geula. If you can remember back that far, Shavuos, we got a Torah. We got a different level Torah than we ever received it before. Time 3,333. I was like, this has to be something significant because, of course, we know how it's explained that 3 is like the number that expresses the holiday of Shavuos, and now we got 3333. I mean, come on. Doesn't mean we know what, but we know something. We know something big. So hopefully it was big, and hopefully we got whatever God was giving. And now, therefore, I assume we have a deeper ability to receive whatever the Tanya is giving. If we got a new Torah, we got a new depth of awareness, a new depth of perception. So we should be able to go more than we were in the past. So we are in chapter 19. If you ask me where, of course, it's going to be a little bit challenging. But we were speaking of the Jews that are not so in touch with their godly nature. Jews that their soul is in a state of exile under the control of their animal nature, under the control of their animal soul. And we explained that each time a person sins, each time a person gives into their animal, what they're doing in essence is hijacking that parallel ability in their godly soul. So if it's a negative love, it's taking the energies of loving God, of godly love. If it's a negative strength, it's taking the godly strength. So when a person has many, many times given in and given in and given in and succumbed and succumbed and succumbed, he reaches a point where his soul is in essence in exile under the control of the animal, under the control of the evil. And we explained at length last time, which was 2 weeks ago, that this doesn't mean that core intellect portion of the godly soul. We explained that the godly soul has 5 levels, that 2 are so high they're outside of our body, and that the 3 within our body we have in the liver, in the heart, and in the mind. And that level in the mind, the energy of that level soul is intellect, is the chachma, the bina, the das, the seminal wisdom, understanding, connectivity. And those forces are so powerful. Both they're far from the animal, because the animal's fortress is in the heart, and they're very powerful because within the seminal wisdom is this force of the peace of God of our soul. So at this point, even though the rest of the soul's in exile, that piece cannot be in exile. It's too God-like to be in exile, but it's sleeping. And we said it's going to sleep until we come to this ultimate test of belief in God. We said, why will this test of belief in God wake up this part of the soul? Because just like if you have a wrong love, you're attacking and trying to overwhelm godly love, and you have a wrong strength, you're attacking and trying to overwhelm godly strength. If it's a question of belief in God, you're attacking the seminal wisdom. That's the force in the soul of belief of God, of basic belief, love, fear, and self-sacrifice for God. So if our animal soul is like going for gold, is trying to get the core God inside our soul, it's attacking our belief in God. It's attacking seminal wisdom. And when seminal wisdom is attacked, she wakes up. And when she wakes up, she fights back. And she has enormous strength, because that's where that piece of God that is the definitive quality of the Jew is found. And that is truly the definitive quality of the Jew. Truly, every single Jew, in essence, is essence of God. I learned something that really inspired me actually over Shavuos along these lines. This was a Mashiach thought in terms of the times of the redemption, where it explains perhaps initially in the redemption, the world will be a more normative world without pain, without affliction, without suffering. And then we're gradually going to morph into a very not natural world. What is the most not natural thing that's going to happen? What is the ultimate not natural change? The ultimate change is going to be when the world recognizes it's not separate from God. That's the most essence, deepest change to the fabric of world as we know it. When the world realizes that it's God, that everything is God, that there's nothing but God. And of course, we know that, but to feel it, to perceive it, to live it. And it's not just that humans are going to get this. Every strata of creation, the stones, the flowers, the animals, all of mankind, everyone will come to this existential realization of self as an energy of God. And that will be the most fundamental change in all of the changes of creation. We think it's like the candies on the trees, or maybe the resurrection of the dead. No, this is the deepest, deepest, deepest change. Now, here comes the punchline, which is why I'm bringing this in. When that change happens, the entire world, inanimate, vegetation, animal, man, all of the planets, all of the galaxies, the entire Milky Way, all of levels of creation, not just our physical world, all spiritual worlds, everything is going to feel a lessening of existence. They're not this existence, they're a flow of God's energy. So it's a lessening of existence, which was perceived of existence as something separate from God. And now they're not this separate existence. They're a manifestation of God's energy, except the Jewish people. The Jewish people will also go through a very fundamental change to come to the point of living as what they are, a piece of God. Meaning the whole creation on every level, the angels, the planets, the orbits, the galaxies, will all feel less of an existence because their existence is a manifestation of God's energy. They're not a separate entity. And the Jewish people will feel, in essence, more, because what we're going to feel, not just know, what we're going to feel is that what are we? What is our existence? Essence. Every single Jew is a piece of the very essence of God himself. So since that's true, even now, in the core of our soul, there is this enormous power of God himself. And that's why when that seminal wisdom, which houses that power, is attacked, it wakes up, it fights back, and it hopefully should and will demolish all those forces. Now, not only will it demolish the forces so they can not win this battle, so they cannot win their attack on seminal wisdom and the treasures seminal wisdom possesses, but hopefully what's going to happen is the entire hold the animal soul has on this godly soul will all be, as the Rebbe says, melted away. It will all dissolve in the presence of this enormous energy of God himself that's inside our soul. So let's read this inside. Any questions before I start reading? Okay. I don't remember exactly.
Where are you reading from?
I was going to say, I don't remember exactly where I was, so I'm going to go back a bit just to the beginning of this concept. So I am, if you're looking inside and you see where it says the 4th of Shvat, I'm like 2, 4, 6, 8 lines after that. If you're looking at a regular Tanya, it's page 25, Chav Hey, about 12 lines from the top of the page. But this status quo of the sinner, which means his godly soul is exiled, his highest powers are sleeping, they're not under control, they're not exiled, but they're not functioning. But when this person comes to a test in a matter of belief in God, now, if we look at this situation, you know, when someone's tested, it seems like, oh, that's so hard. God's being hard on the person, or life is being hard on the person, that they're being tested. You feel bad for someone going through a hard time. But if we can look at it philosophically, theoretically, as in the pages of the Tanya, this test is a tremendous kindness for this person. Meaning until this test, the person is just going to continue with his godly soul in exile and his highest powers of his godly soul sleeping. He would continue without having this overt relationship with God. He would continue enslaved to the forces of evil. So when he's experiencing this test is God's kindness to him, as is often the tests and challenges and difficult things in our life. It's not the kindness we're looking for. We want open, revealed good. We should all get only open, revealed good. But when it doesn't always feel so open and revealed, it seems like a test, it seems like a challenge, it seems tough. It's a good thing to remember that tests are coming from that same gracious, all-loving, all-compassionate, all-nurturing God. And he knows what he's doing. And he's doing it to help me. You know, we say he's doing it for my best interest. What does that mean? He's doing it to help me. Just like this person here, this Russia, this very, unfortunately, person totally controlled by the evil inside of him. God, in his kindness, gave him this test. Because this test is his opportunity to wake up. To have a revival of the dead, so to speak, in his own personal life. So the test is hard. The test is not easy. But the test is really God's compassion that he can get out of his stuck state. And often the same is true for us as well. Often the tests we experience, we are not looking for tests. We don't want tests. But when God decides to give to us one to us anyway, it's the same compassion. That this is a test in our belief in God, which has nothing to do with my developed reason, my knowledge, my intellect, as we developed at length in this chapter and the previous chapter. Belief is super rational. We are not talking about reason here. We're talking about something higher and much more powerful. And this test is touching your seminal wisdom. It's shaking it. It's gashing it, which is good, because that means it's going to wake it up. So guess what? What we want happens. She wakes up. And she does her job with the power of God invested in her. When the seminal wisdom is up, her powers are shining. Her energy is shining. Her connection to God, her being a piece of God is shining. And that blows away the forces of evil. As is written. And he got up like one sleeping God. God's not really sleeping, but it's as if he was sleeping. So our soul is as if it's sleeping. That's how we experience it. Not functioning. But when it's attacked, it wakes up. Thank God. To withstand this test, the emunas havaya, this test and belief in God, without any intellectual explanation, this person is going through a test that he does not have the intellectual resources to overcome. How do we know that? Because if he had the intellectual resources, it wouldn't be called a test. Meaning the term test, sorry, that's just so dirty. The term test is very subjective. It's very personalized. That's a better word for it than subjective. It's very personalized. What is a definition of a test? According to Hasidus, a test is a situation where you do not have the developed skills to pass. You don't have the developed emotional tools to pass. You don't have the developed intellect to pass. So how do you pass? Just by holding on really tight to that most foundational, supra-rational belief in God. That's a test. So for one person, what's a test? It's not a test for another person. Just like we could see in a much simpler way, what challenges you and drives you crazy. Maybe what challenges you and drives you crazy to your neighbor, to your friend, to your sibling, to your mother, to your daughter is so easy. Some people are so challenged by tznius, and some people are like, why is such a big deal? Some people are so challenged not to gossip, and other people are like, why would you gossip about someone else? Why would you talk about someone else? Why would you interest in someone else's business? Some are so challenged to have guests, and some people say, oh my gosh, that's such a no-brainer. I'm cooking anyway. What do I care if 5 more people at the table? So we all know that already. We understand that each one of us is wired differently. Each one of us is coming from a series of lifetimes. We've all lived many times before. We've accomplished many things in our previous lifetime. So if you accomplish this in a previous lifetime, it's under your belt. It's done. You're good. But there's that piece you came back for to this world. There's that piece you did not accomplish in any previous lifetime. That's why you're here. That's your challenge. That's what drives you crazy. And it might feel like, well, I don't get this. This is so easy for everyone else. I do things that are so hard for everyone else, but this is so easy. What's the problem? Why can't I do it? Oh, because this is the reason for your existence. This is very difficult for you. So we know that, we live it, we see it very experientially, that what could be so hard for me could be so easy for you. What could be so easy for you is so difficult for me, and it goes and goes and goes like that. So similarly, I use that as an example of the concept. Similarly, the term a test, in Hebrew we say a nisayon, a test. A test is personalized to you. A test means a situation that your resources do not have the ability to overcome. You have to ascend to just the most basic faith in God to overcome this challenge. And that's why the Rebbe is saying here that this test and belief in God is not something that you could overcome with intellect. It doesn't mean we can't have intellect about God, and we do. But if you can intellectually rationalize and walk through this test, it wasn't a test. It might have been a difficult situation, but it wasn't a test. If you can intellectually overcome it with your intellectual resources, it's not a test. A test is where you can't. You can't. Maybe someone else can, but you can't. So for you, this is a test. And in that situation where my mind is not going to compute, it doesn't make sense to me. And my heart is not computing. It doesn't make sense. Not to my mind and not to my heart, but I stick with God anyway. That's passing the test. And the Rebbe says that is through your seminal wisdom shining. And when she's shining, her energy shines and overwhelms the animal soul. Any questions or thoughts or comments on that? Sarah?
I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about Rabbi Sholem Mordechai Rubashkin and being in jail and learning Chovos Halavavos and how he was besimcha when he got his last judgment that they weren't going to retry him or the Supreme Court or anything. And then Trump released him. So,
Very Mashiach taste.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I still think of it often.
And that's a good example. We don't know his challenges, but we could just see his response. So when what Sarah's referencing is, you know, he had a lot of very devoted pro bono lawyers, and they tried to appeal his case. And of course, how the American system works, an appeal means we can show there was something faulty in the original trial. That's the only way you get an appeal in America. And they came up with all these ploys and schemes and all these things that were faulty. And each thing they tried got rejected. And they had this final hope. And that got rejected as well. So that was it. They were done. There's no more appeals. We cannot appeal. We're done. There's nothing else we can say. In other words, we want a retrial, but the only retrial is for an appeal. And the only appeal is by them accepting that they did something wrong. And of course, they didn't want to accept they did anything wrong. So it was like the final appeal. And it was rejected like all the others were rejected. And then, as Sarah said, his response was quite irrational. His response was joy. Why joy? He says, okay, now God, I just trust you. There's nothing else to trust. If before maybe I erroneously leaned on lawyers and legal schemes and legal this and legal that, guess what? We're done. There's nothing, we're done. It's just you. And to experience that and to experience that with joy, yes, to me, that sounds like a very, very, very essence test. That he came through with flying colors. As we see shortly after that, he did his job. He was finished. His shlichus there ended. So he was kicked out. Anyone else? Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Okay. So continue reading inside. Lisgaber al klipos v'tailos olam hazeh, to overcome the forces of evil, the klipos, and the passions for this world, for all that which God forbids in this world. And not even that, even the passions that God allows. Beheter ubeisser, for passions that are permissible, like another piece of that nice kosher chocolate cake, or for passions that are forbidden, like all the stuff God says no, and we want and sometimes succumb to anyway. Shehurgo behem, that he had become so accustomed to them. It was just him. Meaning, our evil inclination tempts us. But at a certain point, we've done something wrong so many times. That road is so engraved in my mind, in my heart, that my evil inclination doesn't have to walk it with me. I can go do it myself. It says on Yom Kippur, our evil inclination does not work. It's knocked out by the energy of Yom Kippur. So in theory, no Jew in the world could ever sin on Yom Kippur. There is no evil inclination in the world working. They all have, this is their national holiday, international holiday. It's a great vacation day for all evil inclinations. I don't know, they're all somewhere like in Guatemala. So is every single Jew in the world sin-free, at least for those 24, 25 hours? No. But what's going on? What's going on is that sometimes we can so accustom ourselves to sin because we do it again and again and again and again, that for this sin, we don't need the evil inclination. It became us. Similarly, perhaps, a week ago, Yom Kippur is in 4 months, but last week was Shavuos. And we're told for the duration of that holiday, for those 48 hours, we do not have any evil inclination tempting us to not learn God's Torah. For those 48 hours, no force is stopping you from learning. But you might not have learned as much as you wanted to, or even technically could have. Not because of any evil inclination. Again, it's that part of it is on vacation. Just because we got used to it. That laziness, or whatever it is, became ingrained in us. We don't need our evil inclination anymore. So the Rebbe is saying here that this person who is such a sinner, that his soul is in exile, besides that highest part in the brain that's sleeping, coming to this fundamental test, a really difficult one, where he has no resources to overcome it. but his seminal wisdom is being attacked, so it wakes up. So now he just has this pure God energy inside of him shining. And that shining energy allows him not only to overcome this specific, very, very, very difficult test, but all of his other tests, everything he succumbed to his entire life, everything he's transgressed. Because again, each transgression gives the evil another hold on you, another hold, another hold. Why was his godly soul in exile? Because of all the holds, of all the clamping nature of every single sin he's ever done that he didn't repent for. Every time we do something wrong, it lasts forever until we repent. So if he didn't repent, every single sin was another grip, another force, clamping down his godly soul. And now, at this moment, when his whole essence of his soul is shining, all of those things are shattered. All of those things fall away. His whole soul is free. He's free from all the enslavement to all of his transgressions. Not just to transgressions, the Rebbe says, to his passions, to his desires. Not just desires for the forbidden, even at this very high level, even his indulgences in the permissible, he's freed from. Because when that energy is shining, it's such a laser beacon of light, everything melts away. He's completely free, like newborn. That's the kindness here. That's what's happening as a result of this test. Limos behem. At this moment, everything he is habituated to. Our sages say, Hergel nasa tevasheni. When we habituate ourselves to something enough times, it just becomes us. But obviously, we can use that rule in very positive ways. If you habituate yourself to acting patient, even if you're not, you become patient for real. If you habituate yourself to treating others with love, you become loving for real. So that's a very, very powerful rule on the side of good. It really works. Try it. But it also works in the other direction. So if you've habituated yourself to all of this bad, these bad patterns, bad thoughts, bad words, bad actions, it just became you. Guess what? Now you know it's not. It's all melted away. None of that was ever you. This is not you, and it's gone. You're free. To the degree that you are despising these things that if yesterday someone had told you to change, you'd be like, I can't change. That's just me. Take me or leave me. That's me. I'm an obnoxious, self-centered, violent, aggressive person. That's me. No, it never was you. And it all just melts away in the presence of this enormous light of God that's inside your soul. At this point, the only thing you want is God. You're choosing God for your portion. You're saying, Chelki Havaya. That's a quote from Il. God is my portion. All I want is God. I don't want any of this other junk. Because that's the true desire of every Jew. Every Jew, when you get to his true core, he screams out, I want God. The only thing I want is God. The only thing valuable is God. The only thing there is God. That's the truth. But we generally don't live like this. And this person for sure doesn't live like this. But at this moment, he is literally living on that level. Chelki Havaya. My portion is God. That is all I want. Limser lo nafsho kedusha shemo. This person is so inspired. He just wants to give his soul to God, to die for God's sanctification. What? Because remember, this is a test in his belief in God. And the classical version of this test often required physical self-sacrifice. In our generation, it's probably not going to work its way out that way. It might, sometimes, but most of the time, for most of us, that's not how the test is going to be manifest. But But in previous generations, that was how the test was manifest. So if this person is being tested in his essence, belief in God and his seminal wisdom, and that wakes up and all the impurities get burnt away, and he's just this fiery beacon of love of God, he is so wanting and willing to give everything to God, to die for God, as many, 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 many Jews did. And we're seeing here, now we understand this phenomena of all these Jews that didn't live for God and they're dying for God. Because that's our true core. That's what we are. We're a flaming beacon of love for God, but it's so covered over. We don't even know ourselves at all. But when he's tested in this way, and then the light comes forth, he feels himself. He feels what he truly is. I want God. And if right now this is what God wants from me, for sure, all for it. Exactly what I want. To give you everything, God, even including my very life.
So if a person reached that level, then why would they have to have a Gilgul? It seems like they've reached the highest level possible. Their neshama should be like just totally complete.
Such an interesting question. So I'm going to say two things to respond to your question. One, I'm going to say is, according to the Mittler Rebbe, all these Jews that died for God were Gilgulim. Gilgul is a reincarnation of a Jew who lived during the times, let's say roughly the first temple era, when during the time of the first temple, the great passion and challenge that people unfortunately succumbed to was idolatry, literal idolatry. And many, many, many Jews served idols. That was the reason for the destruction of the first temple. And after that, in the era between the two temples, the sages prayed to God. They requested from God to take this temptation away from the Jewish people because we can't handle it. So God graciously did. According to the Alter Rebbe, the author of our work here, the Tanya, he gave us a different temptation instead. He took away the God statues, and instead he gave us the God called money and all the physical possessions of the world. That's what we now worship, but it's a more subtle form of idolatry. So according to the Mittler Rebbe, the second Lubavitcher Rebbe, every Jew that in the times of the first temple served idols had to come back, be reincarnated, to die in sanctification and belief of God's name. And that is how the Mittler Rebbe explains all the deaths of all the Jews, like, primarily like in the Middle Ages, medieval times, where there were so many unfortunate situations like that, all those pogroms. And every single Jew there, the Mittler Rebbe says, was such a soul. The Mittler Rebbe also says that we're done. That era was finished. So, of course, all the tragedies since we can't explain that way. But until his time, that's what he said was the reason. So that's interesting. Just when you see your question, I thought of that. But in terms of a Jew who did die for God, and by the way, we view any person that dies, even if they're not thinking on a religious level, but they die because they're a Jew, they're in this category. Every Jew that died in the Holocaust is in this category. Every soldier that dies defending Israel is in this category. They're all considered dying al Kiddush Hashem, for the sanctification of God's name. So on one hand, they would merit the highest levels of afterlife. But there's reasons why souls come back. Even if you accrue tremendous merit, that doesn't remove you from your obligation to come back if you didn't finish your job. According to the Alter Rebbe, again, whose work we're studying, every soul has to come back and come back and come back until he fulfills or learns every one of the commandments. So if there's a Jew who never went through all of Maimonides' enumeration of the commandments, or went through Maimonides' Mishnah Torah, or something like that, he has to keep coming back until he fulfills every single mitzvah. So even though this Jew died for the sanctification and glory of God's name, if there are 27 mitzvahs on his record that he never learned about and never did, he's got to come back and do them or learn about them. His soul needs that completion. There could also be a certain thing that the world needs his soul for, and that's why he has to come back. Like we know our entire generation, generationally, as a generation, I'm not talking about individuals. Generationally, we've been here a few times. According to Kabbalah, to the esoteric wisdom, this generation was first here as the generation of the Tower of Babylonia, Migdal Bavel. And then we came back as a generation, meaning all of us. It was not an individual issue, it was a generational issue. We came back as a generation of the Exodus, of the redemption from Egypt. And then we came back another time as a generation. Our entire generation came back as a generation of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, whose Hilula was in Meron on Lag Bomer. And now this is the fourth time, right now, all of us alive today are that generation. So again, responding to Firma's question, it could be that maybe the soul finished all of the mitzvahs, did or learned all of the 613, completely rectified any blemishes through this amazing fiery act of sanctification of God's name. But God says, I need you back one more time. I need your whole generation back. I need you to bring redemption. So there he comes back again. So a person could be coming back for many reasons. And that's why a person could die in this fashion and still need to come back. Either again for his personal issues or for how the world needs him. Like we're told, one of the sons of the Rebbe Maharash, of the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, was a very, very holy child. And I won't go into all the details, but he passed away as a child. I don't remember how old he was, 9, 10, something like that, 11, I don't remember, something in that area. And he passed away very, very holy death, and he was a very, very, very holy child. Very holy. He knew he was gonna pass away. He told his father he wanted to wear Shabbos clothing. He said, I'm going to my grandfather. He was so excited. All of the sons of the Tzemach Tzedek, the Merabash's brothers, were all around the bed as this very, very holy soul left. And of course, the Rebbe Marash and his wife were very devastated. And his father, who was the Rebbe at that time, the Tzemach Tzedek, said to them, you should know your child was a reincarnation of the Alter Rebbe. That the world needed that soul back in this world. For whatever reason, for a certain amount of time, that soul needs to come back into this world. And you merited that it came back as your child. So don't feel broken that that soul was taken away from you. It did its mission. It was ready to go. But you merited that if the Alter Rebbe had to come back, he came back to you. Someone's asking a very excellent question, which I honestly have no answer for. I was just quoting a piece of Zohar. Don't have any false hopes that I learned the Zohar. I don't, but the Rebbe brings it in a Hasidic discourse, in a mimer. And it was just so fascinating to me that it stuck in my brain, as very little does, of course. That's what it says, that this generation is a generation that originally was the people of the Tower of Babel. So I don't know, I can make up something, but there's no point in me making up something. I don't know why. I just know that's true, because that's what's written. And then again, the other times we can maybe more understand, okay, the generation of redemption, the Exodus, the generation of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, maybe that's another spiritual level of redemption. The whole revelation of the interdimension of Torah happened then generationally for the first time. And now again, the generation of redemption. That's why we're all here. Any other questions? Any other comments? Okay, so continuing. Sorry. And even though we're talking about a person that the forces of evil were controlling him his entire life, we are talking about such a level person that was enslaved to the evil. And he didn't have the ability to overcome them. How can I say he doesn't have the ability? Don't we all have free choice? Well, Kamama Razal, like the saying of our sages, that the wicked people are subservient to their heart. Now, that means a really, really, really wicked person. a person who's enslaved to the passions of his heart. But the Rebbe is bringing this as like even him, meaning it doesn't mean only such people have these challenges and only such people have this experience. But even this person has this experience. Even such a person who's so wicked that he's enslaved to his own passions. He couldn't escape them. He was buried in his own mud and he had no ability to get out. Even he, in this ultimate test, it wakes up the seminal wisdom, the chachma of his soul. It shines and all those forces of evil melt away. So if that's true for him, imagine for everyone else, for every other Jew who's not in that state. Imagine the transformative experience of the seminal wisdom shining like that. Nevertheless, even this person, when he's coming to a nisayon, remember, a challenge, a test, a situation he does not have the tools to overcome. In essence, belief in God's oneness, meaning there's a test in belief in God. And then there's a more subtle test in the oneness of God. Fine, you believe in God, but you could bow to this idol. It's or just to go with the show, just not get in trouble. Like, the famous example was a very tragic story, this great martyrdom in the times of Hanukkah when so many Jews were massacred for their belief in God. So there was, of course, this famous woman, Hannah, who had 7 sons, and each of the 7 sons in front of her eyes were killed because they refused to serve idols. And they finally came to the youngest son. I don't know how young he was. You've seen the pictures, he looks about 4, but I don't know his age. He was the youngest son of the 7. And the leader, pretending to have a display of compassion, said, oh my gosh, I just slaughtered your 6 older brothers. I don't want to do it to you too. I know you're not going to bow to the idol. I don't need you to bow to the idol. I'm just going to throw it in my ring and you pick it up. I say face, and you live, and your mother has some comfort. He said, no way, you're not fooling me. I'm not bowing to idols. And he killed him. Why couldn't he do that? Why couldn't he just pick up the ring? He couldn't do that because if all there is God, and there's nothing but God, I can't even do a display that could be interpreted as something other than a belief in God. Hashem Echad means that's it. The only reality is God. There is nothing else but God. Not there's one God and not 3, but there's only God. That's the level of test we're dealing with here. And again, this goes back to our own personal service, which is why we're going into this. In our times, and also in the times when the Alter Rebbe wrote this, the Jews of his generation were also not being challenged by this, accept the cross or we'll kill you. That wasn't really what was going on. Then maybe in a more subtle fashion and later, but literally in the times of the Alter Rebbe, that wasn't the issue. But there was this issue of, are we enslaving ourselves to other things? Or do we understand there's nothing but God? There's no force but God. If there's no force but God, there's nothing that has value except vis-a-vis its relationship to serving God. And a lot of times when we prioritize other things, that's a very subtle form of that idolatry. Subtle. It's not obviously classical idolatry, but it's a subtle thing of saying there's God, and I totally believe in God, and I totally serve God, but there's also plus, there's also other things going on. Not as significant, but other stuff. And the oneness of God means, and this is the point Alter wants to bring us to in these chapters, there's nothing else. Everything in our life that exists in terms of its relationship to God and how it too is a vehicle to serve God. And everything in our life, and we should have abundant lives with many beautiful things, everything in our life, healthy things, beautiful things, nachas things, all of that are means of serving and connecting to God. that the foundation of this relationship is in the holy mountains, Harei Kodesh. Again, we discussed this earlier, that the word Kodesh, the ultimate Kodesh is Kadosh. Kodesh HaElyon, the supernal Kodesh, from which comes all things of Kedusha, the supernal Kodesh, Kodesh, that ultimate point of fusion with God, really the ultimate point of separation from everything else, is in the Chachma. Remember, Chachma, seminal wisdom, is called Kodesh HaElyon, the supernal Kodesh, that definitive mark of godliness, from which comes all things of Kedusha, all things that have that flavor, that have that scent, that have that nullification to God. That's where it's all at. Nullification to God, and everything touched by supernal wisdom has that nullification to God. Now, why is this seminal wisdom so powerful? Because inside the seminal wisdom is that peace of God himself, which, as I mentioned before, the essence of the Jew is the essence of God. And that essence piece is found in the seminal wisdom of our soul. And that is why, as I mentioned earlier, by the complete deep revelation of Mashiach, when the whole world changes, the change in us is going to be that we're going to feel this, that we're all going to experience our reality as a piece of God's essence, because that's what every single Jew is. Harikol haklipos b'telim v'tolim. Everything of evil is nullified, does not exist for this person. It's literally as if they don't exist. This person, we're talking about the most extreme case. We're talking about a person trapped. We're talking about a person whose soul was in exile, whose seminal wisdom was sleeping, who was enslaved to evil, who didn't have the power to get out of this trap, this self-made trap. And right now for him, his soul's energy, that piece of God, is shining so much, everything else ceases to exist. As is written, all these nations, all these forces are like nothing before him. It's written, behold, your enemies, God, your enemies will perish. They'll break apart. They become nothing. And it's written, as the wax melts from the fire, so will they all perish. They will cease to exist. The mountains mean these huge forces, seemingly impenetrable. They're going to melt like wax. We just had 4 verses parallel to the 4 levels of evil, the 3 absolute levels of evil, and the 1 level of permeable evil. On every single level of evil, gone, wiped away, ceases to exist at this moment. Now, what's going to happen to this person? Well, we don't know. He might end up dying right now, because he might be in a test where his life is at stake and he's throwing away his life because God's more important. And he might die. And that might be the culmination of this chapter of his life in this world, in this lifetime. Or it might not be a test that his life is at stake and he passes the test and he continues to live. Or maybe it was a test of his life at stake and God made a miracle and he somehow survived. Whatever the situation, let's assume, just to explain the point, that he lives. It wasn't a test that was involving his life or something miraculous happened and his life was saved. What's going to happen to this person tomorrow or in a month from now? What do you think? Any thoughts on it?
I think would affect his reality. Like he would be like a person that had Ches Mason. Like he gave up his life, but he didn't. And so he's living on a whole different plane, a whole different level. That's what I think. So,
That's what we would assume. The hope would be exactly what Firma said, that this is not just one amazing, unbelievable spiritual experience, and a week later he's back to many of his bad ways. No, it's not just supposed to be a one moment unbelievable experience. This is supposed to be the transformative moment that changes his entire life. And we do see historically people like that, people that went through something that literally, people that were wicked and went through something so deep that their entire life was different afterwards. They lived a completely different God-centered life. Now, of course, there's no guarantee, because a person has free choice and he hasn't lost his free choice. But all of the things that were chaining him are gone. It's not like, well, tomorrow he'll fall back into his old bad ways. He melted away those old bad ways. He melted away all the locks that have been on him for years. They're all gone. He's free. And now he has an opportunity. And now he's an opportunity to serve God for the rest of his life. Now, again, we can't guarantee he will, but we can definitely hope he will. That he's like emerged clean, free, and with this very transformative experience, because all that power that freed him is going to recede after the test. Meaning what washed away everything was the shining core energy from his seminal wisdom, which is literally the piece of God's essence embedded in the essence of his soul. That's what was shining and wiped everything away. At that moment, he's like, I only want you. Just think of like, Ne'ilah, Yom Kippur. You really feel it. You only want God. That's all you want. That's all you want. But then that piece, he passed the test. Everything melted. And then that piece receded back into his soul. And now he's not living off its energy. He's living off his own powers, his own developed strengths. So he sort of has to start anew because he doesn't have too many strengths, because he was really in a bad state before. But everything got cleaned. It was a very intense experience. So our hope is, from this moment forward, the memory of that experience, the residual effect, will stay with him. And even though he doesn't have this supercharged core essence shining and empowering him, but he has the memory of it. And he has his normative soul powers. And with them, he's going to walk forward, has to build himself up and commit to living for the rest of his life as a God-serving person. Might not happen because he has free choice, but the hope is it is going to happen. Because all of the evil got washed away. He has a new chance, and he has this very intense experience. Obviously not exactly the same thing, but like in Israel, really in the world, after the 6-day war, there was like this wash, this wave of repentance that was all over the world, and especially in Israel, especially among the people that personally experienced all the myriad of miracles that happened then. It didn't guarantee. People experience miracles. People acknowledge their miracles. People know it's the hand of God. And they don't necessarily return to God and lead a God-fearing life. You don't lose your evil inclination in the process, but there's a chance. And a lot of people do make the right choices because of that experience. Okay, so we are up to the top of page 50. We will, God willing, finish the chapter next week. We will end at this point. Someone like to share something they experienced? You have 2 weeks worth of miracles and kindnesses of God to share with us now.
What you were just, oh, okay, whoever want, go, the other person go first.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. It's Dottie.
Oh,
Was there
Daddy, hi.
Hi, I had to drive my husband. I'm sorry, missed a lot of the class. I'm so sorry. But you know what? The great thing is that we didn't have more casualties from the rockets in Israel. It was, we were, it had that
Amazing.
wonderful Iron
4,000
Dome
missiles.
that saved so many people. Baruch
There's
Hashem.
a beautiful video, but it's in Hebrew, but it's probably pretty, I don't know. I mean, I think it, I don't know if it's clear if you don't know Hebrew, but there's a video that came out with a little video of all these situations where the Iron Dome didn't stop the missiles and the missiles fell, and still there were no casualties again and again and again and again. It was unbelievable. You know, like we look and we're in such pain because obviously every casualty is so deep, and we feel like we keep getting banged. You know, we keep getting hurt. You know, boom, boom, boom. But when we look at what should have happened, so to speak, in a natural fashion, and we see God's kindness and protection, it doesn't take away the losses, but it is, yes, you are absolutely right, Dottie. It is unbelievable. If anyone does understand Hebrew and would like, I put forward to them the video. It's very, very powerful.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I mean, that is very, very true, and that's very global, and that's very big. Sometimes when you hear something very big, you feel like a little silly sharing your little things, but those are our personal things, and those are the miracles we go through, and they're also very valuable to thank God for them. So anyone else?
So what we were talking about at the end of learning Tanya, I have an old friend. I haven't been in touch with her for quite a while, but I remember maybe 20 years ago, a nephew, her brother's son, they're Breslov, and you know things weren't working for him, so he enlisted in the Israeli army, and he was in the army. And I don't know, he went someplace and he was next in line for the bathroom or something. And the guy who, the bathroom blew up with the guy in front of him. And he could have been the one to have been in there. And it totally changed him. He, I think just about, he couldn't believe, you know, what happened and everything. And he went on to sit in Colwell and to get married and everything. That one incident, a big incident, totally changed his view of Hashem and everything else. Amazing. So, you know.
It's true. It's true. And there were many such instances that happened. I mean, like I'm saying, in this most recent war, or many such situations. There's a little clip where like this person's talking, you know, I'm saying in this video, and he says, I was right there. Like he shows you exactly where a missile hit. I was there. I saw them coming and I was trying to think of where's a secure area. So I went there because that looked really secure. And then something in my brain said, go away. He said, I don't know. I just heard like something in my brain saying, move. And I just moved away and the missile fell exactly there where I was. And it's like you can see he's all shaken up, like it just happened. And yeah, I mean, those change people's lives forever. Absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so let's do the piece to remind us that Mashiach's coming, because we definitely know that's true. That's a hard way to understand all the crazy stuff in our world. So we hold on to that belief very strongly. God, you know what you're doing, and you're bringing Mashiach. Okay, vamos lá. So this is from this week in 1991. So the Rebbe says, for all of this, we have additional emphasis in the most recent generations because we're at the very, very end of the road, the heels of Mashiach's coming, especially our generation, like really the end of the road, the final generation of exile. we're like the heel of the whole body of the Jewish people. We're the final generation. And from this, we're going to rise up, just like if there's in the heel, it's like picking up the foot. So we're going to rise up and elevate not just our generation, but all the previous generations. Because this final generation of exile, us, becomes the first generation of redemption. Redemption for all Jews, not just the Jews of this generation, all previous generations are all coming back when we finally bring the redemption. And especially that the shepherd, the high priest Aaron of our generation, the Rebbe Rayatz, the leader of our generation, through his publications that he printed called Kol Kores, where he published immediate repentance, immediate redemption. And with his declaration that we only need to polish the buttons because everything's done. We just have to do that final act. And after that, the proclamation that we finished polishing the buttons. Now, the Rebbe is the one that said we finished polishing the buttons. So the Rebbe here seems to be crediting it to his predecessor. And we only need to stand ready and go to receive Mashiach, the righteous Mashiach, the righteous Redeemer, with a complete and true redemption now. And we deserve it, and we should see it. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thanks as
Thank you.
always, Cyril.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daddy. Thank you.
Thank you.